I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown, the weekly Oscar show where I break down everything to do with awards, predicting what I think is going to get nominated and then ultimately win, including live reactions, bunch of sort of analysis of different award shows, just as we get along that race, finally accumulating into the ultimate Oscars. And this year's going to be a long race, not as long as last year. That was a long one, but just pretty long. I mean, it's going to be the end of March, so it's going to be a nice long season. The awards and everything seem to be sort of coming back after a bit of an odd year. So if you missed out on the past forgotten Oscar films or last year, welcome. We're going to have a great time this year. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. New videos every Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And as we sort of go along the Oscar season, sometimes we're going to have bonus videos during the week as well, just to keep up with things, predictions, reactions, things like that, to keep you updated. When now it is my 6th season of Old's Oscar Countdown. So we have a history of being incredibly accurate, being top 1%, 10% in terms of our predictions. So a big part of that, though, of course, is your comments down below, letting me know your thoughts on some of the categories, some of your predictions on things. All that stuff is plenty of fun. But ultimately, I know you're here for the predictions, so let's get into them. So for Best Picture, I think it's worth mentioning up top that this year there are a total of 10 nominations for Best Picture. That in years past, for about the last 10 years, there had only been sort of 8 or 9. That the Academy essentially could choose 10, but oftentimes because of how the system worked, they only nominated 8 or 9 movies. But this year is different. There will be a guaranteed 10 to be nominated, so as a result, I've given 10 predictions as well as some possible contenders. And if you're new to this series, just note that these aren't necessarily what I think is going to win all the time, but just what has the highest likelihood of being nominated. So as a result, my first movie is The Power of the Dog, the Jane Campion movie. And while I think this is a major Oscar contender, and I think it's a movie that could win, right now I do still see it as a bit of a placeholder. But that being said, it's in the #1 spot for a reason. It's one of the very few films that was shown at both Venice, Telluride, and TIFF at all 3 of the festivals. It has Netflix behind it, and Netflix in the past few years has done extremely well sort of campaigning these types of movies, of which I would classify them as these sort of auteur-driven kind of a Netflix movie. In 2018, we saw Roma sort of fit that mold, sort of a complicated, interesting movie, black and white, from an auteur telling a personal story. Then the next year we had The Irishman, then last year we had Mank, and all those movies got 10 nominations. The Irishman had no wins, but Mank had 2, and Roma had 3, I believe. So this is, a sort of mold that the Netflix campaigners have done very well with, and I think The Power of the Dog sort of fits in that mold this year, because The Power of the Dog should be a very critically acclaimed movie. I saw the movie at TIFF and I was a big fan, but it is also a slow movie. It's also a movie that takes its time. It's a little bit obtuse in many ways. It's not necessarily as populist as something like Belfast, which I also saw and think is going to get nominated. But that being said, it really is a perfect kind of an Oscar movie, because it's a period piece, so I expect it to get a lot of technical nominations, has a beautiful cinematography, has a great score by Johnny Greenwood, so it should get a couple of those nominations. Additionally, it's also an acting movie. I could see 3, maybe even 4 acting nominations from this movie, the most likely being Benedict Cumberbatch, and then probably Kirsten Dunst, and then either Jesse Plemons or Cody McPhee for supporting actor. So it has that acting support. Jane Campion's previous movies, something like The Piano, was a huge Oscar movie. Well, that movie won 2 Oscars for acting. So her movies definitely appeal to the Academy in terms of the actors branch, but also the technical side, because of the period detail and the great technical elements. And I also think she's the frontrunner right now for Best Director, because of how controlled and precise and really sort of Campion-esque the movie is. So I think there's a lot of things going for her and for the movie, in terms of the Netflix factor of it all, the huge campaigns, both technical and acting support. So there's lots of support and reasons to predict The Power of the Dog. And then my #2, I have Belfast. This was the TIFF People's Choice Award winner, and the last 9 TIFF People's Choice Award winners ended up getting nominated for Best Picture. As a matter of fact, a lot of them, something like Green Book, 12 Years a Slave, Nomadland last year, those were the People's Choice Award winners, and then of course they went on to win Best Picture. So Belfast is situated in a really great place right here. There's a lot of buzz within Academy members already. I think that because I saw the movie. It's a very populist movie. It's a movie that feels personal and intimate, but also still has an optimistic kind of a viewpoint of things, which is a great type of movie that the Academy has shown to consistently reward over and over again. I think this will definitely be loved by the actors because there's a lot of great sort of interesting parts within the family. I think Judi Dench should get in for Best Supporting Actress. I can see someone like Ciarán Hinds getting in for Best Supporting Actor. And then right now, Caitríona Balfe and Jamie Dornan are campaigning in the leads, but I think if they campaign smartly and actually put them both in supporting, they could actually get into supporting too. So we have to be careful for that. But it has that TIFF People's Choice pedigree. It has Kenneth Branagh, who is very much running and campaigning for this movie, and has that sort of personal side, which will help within the sort of campaigning and the party going and whatnot. And I think this is a movie, we've been covering the Oscars now for 5 years and we've been doing so well, but in one part it has to do with analytics and stats. That's something I rely heavily upon, but also there's some movies that you just know will do well. I've seen all the Oscar movies. I saw what's done well and what hasn't done well over the years, and let me tell you, Belfast is the type of movie that does well at the Oscars. So I feel pretty confidently it will get in those nominations unless something unfortunate happens. Plus it's also a period piece, so we do expect some technical awards too. Then maybe surprisingly, in my third spot, I have King Richard. I think this is a movie that, similarly to Belfast, can have a sort of great success in terms of its general love and appreciation from the movie. This premiered at Telluride to sort of a rapturous response, kind of a bit of a surprise hit at that festival. There are some concerns over how it's going to be campaigned. I mean, Will Smith was not at Telluride because he's filming a movie, so that is a little bit concerning. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to get some of the technical aspects. It didn't show at TIFF, at which I thought it would have had a very good chance at winning People's Choice there at TIFF had it played, but it strangely didn't play. So it is a little bit of a concerning at this point, how much of it is going to be a Best Picture contender. However, I do think there's a lot of factors that will help it ultimately get that nomination. Of course, the central factor being Will Smith, I think, is the lead right now to win for Best Lead Actor. This is a sort of an unconventional biopic. He's playing Richard Williams, the father of Serena and Venus Williams, the tennis players. So there's a biopic aspect to it. There's sort of an element of playing a real life person, which we've seen in the past, with Rami Malek winning for Freddie Mercury, or Gary Oldman winning when he played Winston Churchill in Darkest Hour. We've seen these performances do really well and ultimately win Oscars, but ultimately the movies get nominated for Best Picture as well because the acting branch is the largest branch of the Academy. So I think the acting branch will really connect to this movie. You also have Anjanae Ellis, who is going to be nominated, I think, for Best Supporting Actress, who gives a really great performance, and I think she very well could get nominated as well for Best Supporting Actress. But ultimately, I think this is sort of an above-the-line, multiple acting nominations, probably a screenplay, and I think just the type of movie, the populist energy, the sort of feel-good energy of it, the biopic. There's a lot of things that the Academy just likes, these types of movies, so much so that I think it will get nominated for Best Picture. Then in fourth place, I have The Tragedy of Macbeth, which is a movie that just premiered at the New York Film Festival to a rapturous response, and I'm banking on the talent of this movie. Of course, it has the critical reception as seen from the New York Film Festival, and we expected it would, but what I think is sort of underrated is not only does it have that critical aspect, it also has a lot of Academy aspects too, because Joel Cohen, the director, Denzel Washington, and Frances McDormand, if you combine all three of those people's Oscars, you have 10 total Oscars. Joel Cohen's won 4, Frances McDormand has won 4, Denzel Washington has won 2. So this is a movie made by people who the Academy really likes, and that really helps. And we've seen Denzel, his past movies, where they really like Denzel movies, do very well. Of course, Frances McDormand just won Best Picture for Nomadland last year, so she's on a bit of a roll. Of course, you also have the Shakespearean aspect to it, being, based on Macbeth. I think it has sort of an interesting blend of play, but also sort of filmic qualities. So there may be some appreciation on the technical side. I expect a cinematography nomination, maybe even costume design. And it has both Apple and A24 campaigning and being behind it. And we've seen Apple do well just recently with Ted Lasso on the Emmy side. So there's no reason to believe that Apple's not seriously invested in the sort of Oscar campaigning award system, and I think that they're going to push hard for The Tragedy of Macbeth. Then in fifth place, I have Nightmare Alley, which is the new Guillermo del Toro movie. If you remember, Guillermo del Toro won Best Director and Best Picture for The Shape of Water just 4 years ago. So this is his latest movie, and I expect it to resonate in a similar way to The Shape of Water. Oftentimes when you see a director win for Best Director, their next movie is always at the very least in the Oscar conversation, and I expect that happened here with Nightmare Alley. Of course, being distributed by Fox Searchlight, or now known just as Searchlight, who have a great record in terms of campaigning at the Oscars, in terms of getting their movies seen in front of viewers, which is a huge part of the Oscars. Just getting your movie seen, if your movie is good enough, it should resonate with the Academy members. It doesn't seem from the trailer to be too fantastical in the sense of like a creature feature, which is a signature of Del Toro's work. However, it has some of the fantastical elements, but also some of the more realistic elements, in hopes, I think, that will actually appeal to a more broader base, so that should help the movie. Of course, he has a star-studded cast in Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara and Bradley Cooper. I could see, 2 acting nominations from there. I think Guillermo del Toro is such a specific and visionary kind of director that he should get in for Best Directing, and if he does campaign, which I do expect him to, he's also a person that is one of the best just to talk about movies with and to talk about his own movies. He inspires a great amount of passion, and he does have a lot of his fans within the Academy already. So I expect Nightmare Alley to be well positioned from a strong, experienced distributor with a star-studded cast with the right people behind it, and I do think it will sort of ultimately make that impact. Then in the 6th slot, I have Don't Look Up, and with this movie, I'm banking on the past Adam McKay movies, essentially. His last 2 movies being Vice and The Big Short. And if you remember from the Vice campaign, not a lot of people had it in Best Picture, not a lot of people had it in Best Director. We were a little bit unsure of its prospects. Yet, when it did come out, it totally resonated, and it got 3 acting nominations, and it got in for McKay for Director, and, writing and editing and picture, and it was a huge success, even though it didn't premiere at any of the festivals. And I think Don't Look Up maybe in a similar place. Now, based on the trailer, it does seem a little bit more broadly comedic than something like even The Big Short, but that's kind of his style. And right now, the sort of political, funny Adam McKay movies have been doing very well at the Oscars. Of course, you have once again another all-star ensemble cast with literally some of the most famous people in the world, with Meryl Streep and Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence and Cate Blanchett and Timothée Chalamet. There's really sort of a great ensemble to this movie. Now, I think this will be less nominations than maybe something like Vice, because it doesn't have a signature role. I could see a Leonardo DiCaprio, but maybe not. It may end up with no acting nominations and maybe just a screenplay and a picture and maybe 1 acting nomination, or just sort of general support from the audience. But we'll have to see. Right now, I'm banking on Netflix being, a smart studio that wants to campaign for this movie, utilizing their staff, and then ultimately it resonating with the Academy. Then I have Licorice Pizza in my next spot, the latest movie from Paul Thomas Anderson, who I actually think is finally going to break through. If this movie resonates, this could be a serious Best Picture contender or Best Director, or most likely, I think, a Best Screenplay winner for Paul Thomas Anderson. Unlike his more recent movies, which are a little bit more darker and mysterious, we'll call them, this is sort of harkening back to his earlier days of Boogie Nights and Punch Drunk Love, set in the 1970s San Fernando Valley. I think this is a movie that will resonate, and I think there's sort of a sentiment within the Academy that Paul Thomas Anderson is as good as some of his contemporaries. Of course, we've already seen someone like Quentin Tarantino and David Fincher be rewarded for their work. However, I think that this is really Paul Thomas Anderson's ability to sort of finally break into that status. Of course, if you remember, his last movie, Phantom Thread, had a bit of a surprise Best Director nomination. So we already know the Academy likes him. The real question is, will this movie resonate? And I think it will, because coming-of-age movies usually resonate within the Academy. Of course, we have Roma in 2018, 2017. He had Lady Bird and Call Me By Your Name. I mean, if you include Belfast this year, which I do think will get nominated, that's another coming-of-age movie with sort of a child or a teen, as its protagonist. So I think this is the type of movie that the Academy likes. I think it has enough sort of supporting stars, and even the 2 leads, which are 2 unknowns in the sense that they haven't acted before on screen. One of them is Alana Haim from the band Haim, and the other is Philip Seymour Hoffman's son. Well, of course, Philip Seymour Hoffman was a frequent collaborator with Paul Thomas Anderson, so there is a little bit of sort of a narrative that you can build that way. I think the trailer looks great, and the early word is that it's really terrific. So this is a movie that I do expect to resonate, just because of the type of the movie and the people behind it. So I do think Licorice Pizza ultimately makes that cut. Then in my 8th spot, I went with West Side Story, which for me is a kind of a big unknown for this festival. It was supposed to release in 2020, but then was pushed an entire year to this fall, kind of December-ish Christmas season. I think they clearly think that this is going to be sort of the prestige musical in a year of many musicals. However, that being said, the musicals that we thought were going to resonate really haven't. Dear Evan Hansen is the most recent debacle of that, of it being a box office bomb and just poorly received critically. But then something like In the Heights was a huge sort of critical success. However, it did not resonate with audiences either in the theaters or on HBO Max. So that movie's really out of the Oscar conversation. So it's going to be hard to see, which movie resonates. Of course, we also have Lin-Manuel Miranda's Tick, Tick, Boom. We have Disney's Encanto, which maybe could compete in an animated section. So it's hard to tell. Of course, you have Cyrano, the Joe Wright movie, which is also a musical. So there's a lot of sort of musicals this year, but which one will resonate is hard to tell. But I'm banking on this one. I'm banking on the name of West Side Story, a movie that has done very well at the Oscars previously, the original, ultimately winning 10 Oscars, including Best Picture. So there's a name behind it. Of course, you also have the names of Steven Spielberg and Tony Kushner behind this movie. So you expect there to be a certain level of quality from some of the greatest filmmakers and collaborators of all time. I do think it will make money at the box office and sort of multiply throughout that Christmas season. It may not be the biggest success. Maybe it won't be West Side Story level success, but I do think it will resonate. And I do think just the fact that you have Steven Spielberg and you have Universal and Amblin really sort of pushing for this and wanting to be the big spectacle in the same way West Side Story was, the original that is. Now it could flop, but I'm betting on the talent behind it. Also, I do think even if it doesn't get in for Best Picture, I could see Ariana DeBose, a nomination for Supporting Actress. I could see some technical awards. You expect it to maybe get it for song or sound or something like that too. So it should get a lot of nominations. It should be campaigned heavily and sort of peak at the right time at the sort of end of December there. Then in my 9th spot, I have Dune, which is a movie that I think a lot of people are really rating highly and thinking it can be this great thing. However, I'm personally a little bit more skeptical. Now, I've seen the movie and I am a big fan of it. That being said, it's very much Dune Part 1. It is very much has an anticlimactic ending. It's very much the setup of maybe a great story rather than a great story in and of itself. And I think that's going to frustrate some viewers. Of course, we haven't seen really franchise movies do too well. We saw, the one case of Black Panther, then you can go all the way back to something like Lord of the Rings. But, we have seen sort of these big sci-fi franchises not necessarily resonate as much within the Academy. Denis Villeneuve's last movie, for example, Blade Runner 2049, did very well in the technical awards. However, didn't get that sort of upper level echelon of respect and, did not get a Best Picture nomination. And I think Dune is a little bit more prestige-y than that, does have a little bit more of an established ensemble cast that is very well liked by the Academy. It's also a movie that played at these festivals. However, the initial reviews have been somewhat mixed. So this could be a movie that I think could win multiple technical awards. I do expect this to be a huge technical feat. It has, of course, Warner Brothers behind it, but its best case scenario is something like Dunkirk, where Denis gets in for director and maybe gets a lot of technical awards, but I don't expect it to get any best acting nominations. And right now I have it in for Best Picture, but I think it's personally threatened because I don't see Denis in Best Director, just because I'm unsure of how exactly the Academy will relate and ultimately connect to this movie. And then in 10th place, I have the indie darling Coda. And I think every year there's one sort of indie darling, independent movie that maybe premiered at Sundance, the little movie that ultimately gets the nomination. I mean, sometimes it does very well, like Minari last year, but we've seen in past movies like The Farewell, not do as well, which is in the sort of same slot. And Coda won the grand jury at Sundance, so it has that support. It has Apple behind it, which is good because, they want to sort of campaign for their movies and are really putting a lot of time and effort into the Oscar campaign. But there's a couple things that I think this movie is going to get nominated, at least right now. The first being that the people who see it really like it. This is a very sort of charming and heartwarming movie. Just the fact is, we have to make sure that people have seen it. It is a movie that doesn't have a lot of stars in it. But I think if you do see it, they're going to appreciate it. I think there could be a couple acting nominations, particularly someone like Marlee Matlin for Best Supporting Actress. Of course, she won already in 1986 for Children of a Lesser God. She's a deaf actress, so I think people will remember her just based on historical precedent. But Coda is sort of a heartwarming, sweet movie that I think could sort of show up as a surprise SAG Ensemble nomination. And they're doing the right thing, and Apple is, in terms of campaigning, there's a lot of Q&As already, getting the cast out there and introducing themselves, because it is a cast of mostly, lesser known actors. They're not like something like Don't Look Up, where you have Meryl Streep and Leonardo DiCaprio. They are sort of lesser known actors. That being said, though, I think the quality of the movie is a kind of Oscars movie. It is the sort of that indie darling movie that, if it's played right, if it's campaigned right, if it gets into the right people, I think could get screenplay. I think could get Marlee Matlin, and ultimately sort of sneak into that sort of 9th or 10th slot of Best Picture. But talking about some of my possible contenders, the first one being House of Gucci, which is a movie that a lot of people were really in on early on. I mean, if you check its odds on Gold Derby, you could see it as high as 3 or 4. You see, director, you see all this acting nominations, and truthfully, I'm a little bit skeptical. I saw the trailer, and I wasn't necessarily impressed. I look at the talent behind it, and there's no guarantee on that side. And so right now I'm questioning ultimately the quality of the movie. That this definitely feels like a unabashedly almost trashy kind of a movie in its sort of grandiosity and spectacle and movie stars and beautiful fashion and whatnot. So there could be some respect in terms of the technical awards, costume design. I definitely expect that. However, I looked at some of the acting races and I go, okay, Adam Driver for Best Lead Actor. Well, the movie doesn't really seem to be too interested in Adam Driver, so I don't think he's going to get in there. Lady Gaga for Best Lead Actress, it could, but it could also kind of turn into a disaster with that accent. Jared Leto does a huge transformation in supporting actor, but if the movie doesn't resonate, does he get in there? Ridley Scott's movies in general, sometimes they resonate with something like The Martian, but something like The Last Duel, which was just released, doesn't have that same sort of impact level. So, it's hard to say exactly how well this will resonate. Something like All the Money in the World only sort of half resonated. This may be a movie that does well, Critics' Choice or something, but it could be a movie that just doesn't resonate with critics and then ultimately doesn't resonate with audiences and then just fades away. So because the talent behind it isn't as proven as something like Guillermo del Toro, I'm a little bit more skeptical of its Oscar chances. So right now I have it in a possible contender situation. Then some other movies I want to talk about. The Lost Daughter, which is Maggie Gyllenhaal's latest movie, which is the movie that I think could get in for screenplay, even something like Olivia Colman for Best Lead Actress, but maybe a little bit too of a divisive movie, a little bit too artistic in that sense, similar to something like Spencer, which I think Kristen Stewart could even win for playing Princess Diana. However, the movie is a little bit more atypical, a little bit more artsy as compared to a traditional biopic. There's Mass, which was a Sundance favorite. However, that movie is a little bit more divisive and has these sort of lesser known stars of Ann Dowd and Jason Isaacs. However, we could see both of them get nominated as well as a screenplay for that movie, so you want to check out for that. There are some other movies we can talk about, but those are the main ones I think are, at least for right now, in that main contention of getting the Best Picture. Of course, we're going to have 10 nominations this year, so there's plenty of different opportunities and chances to be wrong and right. So that's where you come in. Please comment below. Let me know your thoughts on what you think will get nominated for Best Picture. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video. Stay tuned to next week, where I'm going to be breaking down the Best Lead Actor category. That should be a lot of fun. But until next time, stay tuned.